Welcome everyone to InferenceSwap.com, InferenceSwap.com shows, and today we bring you a new show that is going to be starting today in front of your eyes. It's called InferenceSwap News with your host, me, John Pappas, which will bring about current events, local events, and global events around the world pertaining to where we're at during this crisis. Thank you so much for listening. Will you do me a favor? Go to InferenceSwap.com and subscribe. There you will find our podcast where you can subscribe on iTunes or Google Play at InferenceSwap Radio. We also now on YouTube have InferenceSwap on YouTube where you can see all of our videos as well as at the website. So go to InferenceSwap.com and subscribe and you'll get everything. Go to the YouTube channel and help us by subscribing, and guess what? Go to the podcast InferenceSwap Radio right now to help us out as we bring you quality shows for nothing. Just help us out by subscribing. Today's new show is InferenceSwap News. My name's John Pappas and I'm your host. Thank you for stopping by. We are going to get right into it. This new show is going to be headline news and weird news just to break the tension of your day, so to keep you up to date and then have some fun. And then if you're looking to watch Table Talk, that'll be a separate show later on in the week that will deal with God's mission and discipleship, and I can't wait to bring you that one as well. Well, welcome everyone. My name's John Pappas. I'm your host, and we're going to get right into this thing. I don't know if you've been watching what's been happening out there today, but people are protesting across the country because they're worried about the pandemic across the world and the economic crisis around the world, and they're worried about government overreach, which has made people stay quarantined and sort of enforced it if depending on the political ideology of your state and local government. And so it seems that in several states, people got together and held rallies against their local governments to reopen and lift the quarantine. In response, if you can believe this, and I think I can, the media and, of course, the far-left ideologues who don't just give us the news, they report their ideologies through the news, tried to use the same old narrative concerning conservative protesters who are worried about government overreach to President Trump during his COVID press conference this week. Watch this video that I'm going to show you, and it's a little bit hard to understand. We had some technical difficulties, but I think you'll get it. And you'll see that the media are worried that these protesters, and here's the same old narrative, are not just protesters, but they are Nazis. Take a look.
Are you concerned that you're talking about liberation, the Second Amendment? Are you inciting violence among the few people?
I've seen the people, I've seen the interviews with the people. These are great people. Look, they want to get, they call cabin fever. You've heard the term? They've got cabin fever. They want to get back. They want their life back. Their life was taken away from them. And, you know, they learned a lot during this period. They learned to do things differently than they have in the past. And, you know, they'll do it hopefully until the virus is passed. And when the virus passes, I hope we're going to be sitting next to each other in baseball games, football games, basketball games, ice hockey games. I hope we're going to be sitting next to each other. I hope you have a golf to the Masters is going to have 100,000 people, not 25 people watching. At the course. I think these people are... I've never seen so many American flags. I'm seeing the same thing you're seeing. I don't see anything differently. Well, that I totally would just say no way. But I didn't see that. I see all. Of course, I'm sure the news plays that out. I've seen American flags all over the place. I have never seen so many American flags at a rally as I have in these rallies. These people love our country. They want to get back to work.
Wow. Can you believe that? So they see protesters and they're not of the same political opinions. And the next thing you know, everybody's a Nazi. It seems like when we don't agree with somebody who's a leader, they all become Nazis. Or we don't agree with ideologies of friends, we call them Nazis. We got to get past the Nazi thing and just realize that it's a really, really bad comparison, and it's just not a strong argument. And I got to tell you, this is one of the few times where I've seen Trump have a measured response to a stupid question, and he keeps getting them. And maybe rightly so. There's a lot of things that are going on right now, a lot of people nervous, but people are a little scared. Their lives and livelihoods have been taken away from them, and that means their American constitutional rights have been grabbed from them by the power of the government through this quarantine process. And I get it. People need assistance, and they should get assistance because the government has done this. But we don't want to turn this whole thing, while we're sitting in our homes trying to do the right thing, into a left-wing power grab for our government. And it's funny how that is tried. Well, is to quote the left side, you never let a crisis go to waste, and they really haven't done that from the beginning. And it's funny how they'll side with the Antifa as measured protesters, but this group who just want to get back to work and get outside, they're Nazis. That's just crazy, and we got to get away from that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's overstating it that while we're all trying to do the right thing by quarantining, we've watched the left try to do a power grab. I don't know if you remember this, but when we knew that we were going to be off for a while and Trump was trying to put a care package together with the Senate, the far left tried to throw in the Green New Deal. Remember that? And just recently, they've tried to hold small business funding hostage because a lot of small businesses aren't getting the funding they need to remain open, and we know that they are the backbone of our local and American economy. And the left tried to hold small business funding hostage in order to reduce fuel emissions in commercial airlines. Like, this is the time for that. They can't stop playing politics, and they can't stop grabbing or reaching into our constitutional rights. In fact, and I've already reported this, they were passing laws to allow criminals out of jails while at the same time arresting fathers for playing catch at a park or playing softball at a park when they were by themselves. And the sign said, just stay, keep your social distancing between other families, but they still got handcuffed in front of their children. So you see, these are huge power grabs and overreaches by the government, and we can't allow these power-hungry ideologues, whether on the left or the right, to take this power and without anybody checking them, right? It's reasonable for us as citizens to keep these guys in check. So with all that said, is the COVID-19 quarantine actually necessary? Was the response, now that we know the facts, actually necessary? That's the big question that everybody's asking right now. Now, my personal opinion on it is I think it's yes. We had to do this at first. I think we had to understand, though, that the quarantine was not to prevent the disease. The quarantine was necessary to prevent the disease from spreading and from overwhelming the hospitals with patients, and which was what you were seeing sort of in New York for a time period. Now New York is giving ventilators and extra medical help to places like Michigan. And so what we have to understand that this quarantine was never to stop the disease. It was only to prevent or manage the curve. And so we could treat people evenly and not be overwhelmed and not overwhelm all these hospital workers. Now, because of this, we're starting to see experts sort of change their tune. If you remember, everybody was going to die. 2 million people were going to die. And now, as they're keeping China and other countries sort of more accountable to the numbers that they're reporting, their models are starting to look better. I don't think they're perfect yet, but they're starting to look better where they can see into the future the projections. And one of the things that's coming out is an expert epidemiologist, the guy that is an expert on viruses. His name's Johann Giesecke, and he's actually he was working at one time. I think he was the first guy in the World Health Organization, and he's an advisor to Sweden and the Netherlands on the COVID virus and its outbreak. He belongs to a group called UHERD, and he's basically saying that the shutdown is basically dumb, that what we're doing isn't doing anything at all. So let's take a look at this video and see, as this guy interviews him, what he actually says.
So at the point we are now, what you're advocating then is we protect those groups better. And as far as the rest of the population is concerned, we just allow it to pass through the population, essentially.
Essentially, yes.
Which is, I mean, I know that it's now...
Yes.
That's what's commonly understood by what we call the herd immunity strategy, basically.
Yeah. There are others, it's not just the old and trade. I mean, there are people that should be protected. That, I don't think you can stop it. It's spreading. So you can stop it for some time, but then, I mean, countries that have been successful, South Korea is giving up now. They can't maintain their policies. Taiwan, I don't know about Taiwan. They were quite successful. Singapore, similar problem.
Oh, so here we are again. Sorry about that. We don't get the right information because of a lot of different variables. Part of it's the media. Part of it is the response from countries like China and the modeling system, which is an imperfect system based on having accurate numbers. But here's a guy who comes and says you can't stop the spread of the disease and that we should protect high-risk people, but the rest of the world should go out and begin what he calls herd immunity. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's basically placing a significant portion of the population out in the world with the virus, and they believe through history, I guess, that they will develop immunity as a herd, as a population, to the disease for the rest of the world, and therefore the disease will take care of itself. But notice this, and this is the problem with media in general, whether it's left or right. When politics gets involved, everyone thinks in terms of extremes, and what we find is that there's no happy medium. You know what I'm saying? And so what we're sort of getting from all different news outlets is either all of us have to shut down everything. We have to shut down schools, sports, events. And for a while, I think we had to do that in order to get a measured curve, right? But now there's new reports coming in. And so what we see is we either shut down everything or all of us will die. That's our two options. Stay at home or all of us will die. And I think that's pretty extreme thinking. I think it was necessary for us to be smart at first, but as we've held the world accountable, and we've seen and watched, I don't know if you remember this, but at first 2 million people were going to die. That was the numbers that not only the media were throwing at President Trump, but everybody was throwing at President Trump. So it was projected that 2 million people were going to die. Then it was hundreds and hundreds of thousands were going to die. And now we're finding that it's going to be significantly less than that. And right now we only have 36,000 deaths in America, which isn't even reached levels of the flu. So now that based on science that we have, we can take a look at this virus and we know some things. We know, for example, that while we have had this initial virus come, we know that for certain it's going to come back, that it's not going away. It isn't how, there's really nothing we can do to prevent that now. So it isn't, when it comes to dealing with this virus, it isn't just how we protect the high-risk people, but it's also how do we protect the greater population over the long run. We have to think in terms of both. So the question really is, now that we flatten the curve, and now that and we know that the virus will return in cycles. Specifically for us, the next one's going to hit around July, the end of July or August. The question we're now asking is, are we prolonging what is inevitable by staying quarantined? And guys like this and many others think this is true. So what's really being said here is, no matter what we do, whether we go outside or stay quarantined, what they're saying is that although the amount of deaths that were projected are now going to be significantly less, they're going to happen no matter what we do. So if it was, let's say, 60,000 people are going to die, let's say, what they're saying, whether you stay in or go out, whether you try to condense it in a short time or you just go out over a prolonged period of time, the same amount of people are going to die no matter what we do. And so therefore we don't really have an easy answer, because like for you and me both, we want to keep our loved ones protected. Nobody wants to get this thing, and nobody wants to see dad or mom or grandpa or grandma get this thing. So we have to find a happy medium, but we cannot keep the economy closed. Now, I'm with you guys as far as if I was a business leader, I'd be freaking out a little bit, but I'm not. But what I am seeing is that we have to find a happy medium and not deal in extremes. We have to find both sides of the argument and then come and evaluate it right down the middle. So that's sort of the global news today. And we're going to sort of go back to the world. We're going to go back to the COVID news right now. I'm sorry, let me pull this map up for you guys and take a look at where the pandemic is actually at. Now, just because we know my previous section where I'm saying, like, I think it's inevitable that whether we stay inside or go outside, that we're going to have the same amount of deaths, that there's nothing we can do to stop that. That doesn't mean that in some parts of the world, the pandemic is taking a toll. In other places, the curve is leveling off. But right now, here in America, there's 753,000 cases and 36,000 deaths, basically, a little over that. Now, around the world, as the doctor just told us in that clip, and this brings us back to that question, like, what should we do and how should we move forward? Places like Singapore, which got hit early on, and they put policies in place that stopped the spread, are now having a big resurgence of COVID cases and people dying. And so it's escalating there, and we're finding in places like Turkey and Russia and in Africa where the cases are now escalating and the death toll are starting to amount. So as opposed to places like Italy and Spain and France, who've got hit really hard right off the bat, they're starting to flatten the curve. The United Kingdom and America are starting to flatten the curve. But that doesn't mean that we've prevented this thing by flattening the curve. All that means is we've made the situation more manageable. So we have to be aware of what's happening locally around us and what's happening globally around us, so we know how to move forward with wisdom as far as how to reopen things and get the economy back up and moving. And that's not always easy. Now we're going to turn locally, and we're going to look at what's happening on the map here in Indiana. Now, in Indiana, where we live, this weekend we had 505 new cases, 7 deaths, bringing the total to about 11,700 positive tests and about 570 deaths here in Indiana. Now, if you've been following this, and I have, Northwest Indiana and Indianapolis have doubled in positive cases, and the curve is not flattening out right now. So that was just since last week. We've almost doubled our cases. Now, this has caused Governor Holcomb to extend the quarantine to May 1st. But again, we have protesters, whether you're conservative or not, that are putting pressure on him to get the economy back open and moving us out there to buy and sell things. But I can tell you that from somebody who's done the research, this curve hasn't flattened. And so Holcomb said this week that he's been very responsible about looking 2 weeks at a time to implement executive orders to know how to move forward. But he's trying to take in all the facts and just see what comes in so that he knows what to do. So I think taking a week by week, or at least 2 weeks by 2 weeks, is smart. I think right now, even if you opened up the economy, people are not going to just walk back out there and just go back to school and start doing Little League and karate and church and all these different things. I think we're going to literally have to probably take the herd immunity into consideration, because the COVID now is not going away. It's going to be in cycles just like the flu. Well, that's our world news for today. I want to now move to some more lighter topics in weird news. And so we're going to transition over to weird news. And today is weird news. In today's news, we have a miniature donkey named Mambo, who is getting some online love, specifically in North Carolina, where there's a farm that had this great idea to have animals spice up their tedious virtual online meetings during the pandemic. Companies are now choosing people like Mamba and other farm animals into their Zoom meetings and other video calls to sort of lighten the atmosphere. You can now go to this farm and contact this farmer, and to get some laughs, you can now, for $50, reserve 10 minutes with animals like Mamba to get, I guess, to break the tension a little bit in what's happening in their corporate world and what's happening in their local, communities. So that's sort of weird, a little crazy. And my last story for today, which I thought was sort of neat, was there is this company called Magellan TV. It's a video streaming service that is seeking a true crime buff, which they'll pay $1,000 during the coronavirus lockdown to watch 24 straight hours of documentaries. The service is seeking someone with a passion for true crime to document a 24-hour experience, all-night crime watch, and report it on their social media channels. Anybody who's a chosen candidate will get $1,000 to be given by anyone who's selected and does exactly the criteria that they need. And then they'll reward you with not only you get to see all that cool true crime stuff, but you'll receive a free subscription from Magellan TV. So if you're a watcher of true crime and like crime shows and you want a free subscription to Magellan TV, it is time for you to go over there and see if you can be one of the chosen ones that can make $1,000 for sitting there eating popcorn and documenting your night on Instagram or something. Well, guys, that is weird news for today. That is InferenceSwap news for today. We'll be back later in the week. Look forward to Table Talk with me, where we're going to transition out of news into the world of discipleship and, of course, God's mission. And it's a great show, so tune in for that one later in the week. I'm your host, John Pappas. Do me a favor. Go to InferenceSwap.com. If you're on iTunes or Google Play, look for InferenceSwap Radio and subscribe. And of course, if you're on YouTube, look for InferenceSwap and you'll see all of our videos down there, which is Under the Roof, Table Talk, and now InferenceSwap News. Hey, you guys have a blessed and wonderful day. I will see you on the next show. Until the next time, God bless you guys, and I am out of here.